Billy Mays here for time traveling.
Not quite the intro I was going for. Actually, do you know what actually came into my head when you took your breath to sort of that? I was watching a video on TikTok the other day. It was something a video about Robin Williams, and all that came into my head was like, "Good morning, Vietnam." Like, no. For those of you who are like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah.
Hello.
See, she wasn't lying when she said that she had no intro planned for this.
Yeah. Hello and welcome. Yes. This is our welcome to the rambling of the film. No, yes. This is Time Traveling Team. Usually, yes, we're reviewing episodes of Doctor Who and talking about the characters. This week, because it's our last recording of the year, we're having a bit of a Q&A time. There is very little structure. Usually we're quite structured. And this is ultimate rambling location. I'm Trish. That's Paddy.
I'm Paddy. Yes.
Yeah, just in case you don't have a clue who we are. This is an interesting episode to start on, by the way, if you've never listened to any of our stuff before. I mean, you're welcome to stay. We won't say no. Like, come in, hang out. It's fun.
But it is absolutely the most reflective. It's the most reflective of us, because when we're not talking about a specific topic, we tangent to fuck.
Which is why these are called ramblings.
Yes, exactly.
Because that is what we do. So we have a couple of questions that we've received through Twix, as I'm now calling it. And then I have a couple of questions I wanted to ask Paddy. Paddy may have a couple of questions he wants to ask me, and we may just evolve into general discussion. And yeah. So what do we want to start with, Mr. Paddington?
I think we should start with our lovely loyal listeners' questions.
Okay. We will start with the man that is Paul. Hello, Paul. Again.
Hello.
In case no one knows who Paul is, though we mentioned him on occasion, Paul is our dear friend, who is one of the co-hosts of the Half Measures podcast, who, let's face it, at this point, they do things to a full measure, but...
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It's false advertising as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
For anyone that is into films and TV series, definitely check them out. Paul and his friend Dan, they're based in New Zealand, and they do the weekly podcast based on anything that they've watched, any new movies, old movies, things that are just on a frequent basis for them. Always a very good and interesting discussion.
Yeah. So, Paul has two questions. We'll go to the first one, which, Paul, you fucker, I've been literally thinking about this question for days, right? I spend at least 2 hours every day driving to and from work. It's closer to 2.5 hours. And this has been the one question that has plagued me on my drive to and from work for the last 3 days. That question is, what is the single biggest positive change and the single biggest negative change you have seen or experienced moving from the 4th Doctor to the 5th Doctor? I asked the question, so you fucker get to answer first.
Oh, thanks. Okay. Single biggest positive change. Giving Christopher Bidmead 2 stories to write. Honestly, Paul, mate, that's a very difficult one to answer, because, as most people that have been listening to the show know, the 5th Doctor has not been a particularly favorite era of ours. And no, that's not to say that there's nothing great in it, because there is some fantastic stuff, and mostly centered around Nyssa. But I don't think, for me anyway, there's anything in the switch over from the 4th to the 5th Doctor in terms of the Doctor themselves that is a positive improvement from... a complete cop-out answer. I think maybe the positive is that a change of pace because it was clear that Tom was getting burnt out.
Mm.
That was very visible in his performance within the stories. Having Peter come in, Peter did seem to bring a genuine enthusiasm for things. And like, we love Tom a lot. Like, I think he's both of our second favorite Doctor.
Mm.
It was very difficult to watch him kind of phone it in and clearly fall out of love with the role at the time. Now, he has done an awful lot of work since he left, like with Big Finish and everything else, but he was falling out of love with it. And having Peter come in, it was a complete breath of fresh air in that regard. So it kind of brightened things up for a small bit. So I would say that was a positive change. How about you? Or do you want me to go with the negative side of things before you pivot? I pivot back to you for both of them.
Yeah, so let's do the positive. But and again, I feel like an ass for struggling with this so much, right? I'm convinced that Paul phrased the question this way specifically because he wanted to be a pain in the hole. When I drove home today, I was like, none. The answer is none for me. I could say that there were changes that could have been positive, which is upping us up to 3 companions again.
Mm-hmm.
Could have been interesting. Again, bring a bit of fresh energy into the situation. I don't think it hit, but it could have been interesting. I think trying to go a bit darker with some of the companions was interesting. Again, I don't think it stuck the landing, but it was interesting. Do you know what the biggest positive change has been since we moved over? And it's more of a personal thing, is, and I feel like it's such a shit for saying this, because I wasn't enjoying the episodes. When we decided that we were both too stressed and too busy to do this every week, or we're going to do every second week, I felt okay doing that. Whereas if we were still doing Tom, where we were really enjoying the episodes, I would have felt like, oh, but like we can't do every 2 weeks. We have to continue doing every week. And I would have felt that stress to keep doing that. Mm-hmm. It's because I wasn't enjoying the stories. It significantly eased my stress in knowing I only had to do it once every 2 weeks.
But like, we, like, back in the very early days of the podcast, we did record once every 2 weeks, but we recorded 2 stories at a time. Like,
I was only recording on Saturdays.
Yeah, Sunday mornings. That was during the first Doctor, and then when we moved on to the second Doctor, we did the once a week. But yeah,
which is a very stupid positive. But to be perfectly frank with you, Paul, I haven't enjoyed this run very much. So,
but that's actually kind of touches upon one of the questions that I have for you later on down the line. But I think, to flip to the second side of things there, and it's kind of compounding things with the negative aspect of it, is the biggest negative change going from 4 to 5 is that, for me, I think with the exception of Nyssa, the companions no longer feel like friends.
I 100% had the exact same thing written down. Companion relationship was the biggest downfall.
Because, and like, no, that's not to say that, like, we talked just previously in our Turlo rambling about Stephen, and the Stephen Doctor relationship, very different to the Doctor Ian relationship, and kind of like with Dodo as well, the same there. Ben and Polly with the first Doctor, they were too new, it was too fresh, and plus Bill left shortly after. But Ben and Polly with the second Doctor felt like friends. And then the whole way along, yeah, like I would say definitely, because the fourth Doctor and Adric, it almost felt like a weird Batman and Robin type thing. You could kind of tell that he was being built up to be a bit of like a ward. But then when it change to the Fifth Doctor, it just felt like the older brother suddenly saddled with like his dead siblings' kids type thing. And you had Nissa, who that was the only companion relationship that actually felt like a friend relationship. Tegan, and look, we know that there is the huge fan base for the Tegan and the Fifth Doctor. Personally, I don't see it.
I have a question on that for you later on, actually.
Okay, yeah. Personally, I don't see it, so I'm not going to make any more comments on it until Trish asks her a question later on about it. But I think I've answered for you in this regard.
Yeah. So it's the companion relationship. I think the prime example of that, to your point, is Adric. Now, you and I don't talk about Adric as often now because we're mostly talking about the other three and whatever. But the primary example of that is Adric, who went from being the sort of cheeky ward character to being the shit on your shoe, let's forget he's a child type of character in his relationship with the Doctor. And that to me is the biggest thing I think. And like, other people may have enjoyed that change. They might like a little bit of, make the characters interesting, make them compelling, introduce a little bit of conflict. This isn't Next Generation Star Trek where Gene didn't want any interpersonal conflict between the characters. That's not what this is, right? And some people prefer there to be some bit of conflict between the characters because it feels more realistic and whatever. But if you're going down that road, and we've said this about Tegan before, Tegan specifically got it really bad.
Yeah.
Bitch, get off the ride. Just fucking go home.
But as well, there is a way to do Doctor-companion conflicted relationships. There's a way to do it right.
Yeah.
And with Adric, they didn't.
Yeah.
And as we said, like, it actually it taints your view of Adric a small bit.
Yeah.
Because when you're watching Adric in, say, the likes of Kinda or I think it's mainly Kinda, but he just comes across as this like brat. But you have to kind of put and then all you just think about is like, and even in Fort of Doomsday and Black Orchid, it's just like, he's like that fucking annoying character. But go back to Full Circle, State of Decay, Warrior's Gate, Keeper of Traken. That arc is great for him.
Even Legopolis, who was very good.
Legopolis, yeah, absolutely. Like, and it's just he's completely let down by this switch in style, Doctor writing, what have you.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and like, if you've listened to us for any amount of time, and obviously Paul has because he's been our loyal friend for a great number of years.
Yeah.
But you know that the reason we do our show in the format that we do, so slight rambling history lesson, we took the core structure of our format, the idea of having the weekly episode reviews with the story summary, the trivia, and then discussion, the idea of having separate rambling episodes. We lifted and shifted a lot of that from Mission Log, right? The Roddenberry Star Trek podcast that our friends Norm and John do, right? With their permission, I will reiterate. But Norm and John talk about morals, meanings, and messages, and does the story stand the test of time? Because they're looking at Gene's vision and blah, blah. Where we were like, we don't really care if the story, like, production-wise looks great. That's not what we watch Doctor Who for. We focus on character. That's why the bulk of our discussion is on character. Yeah, we talk a little bit about plot, but often that's either in the overall section at the end or it's plot as pertains to character. Character is the central part of storytelling for you and me. At least in our Doctor Who storytelling.
Yeah. And
so if the character
as well.
Yeah. If the character relationships don't work, the whole thing falls apart. From the way that we look at it. And you can have the best written story in the world, the most gritty, the most realistic. if I don't like your characters, or if your characters don't like each other, what the fuck do I want to watch it for? Paul, that was an interesting starter question. Paul does have a follow-up question, but I think it would be good for us to sort of get that, to
Yes.
tie these two things together. I was going to say get that out of the way, that's not what I mean, but to tie these two things together. You can ask the question this time, since you
Okay, let
took
me just actually...
umbrage with me jumping ahead.
I didn't take umbrage with jack shit. Sorry, I have to just bring up the question here in front of me. My apologies. No, that's not it. Yes, here we are.
We've
Paul's
been doing
questions.
podcasting for years, everybody.
Yes. Paul's question, supplementary. If you had a TARDIS and could travel back to 1982, what would be one piece of advice that you'd give to 1, John Nathan Turner, and 2, Peter Davison?
Okay. John Nathan Turner. You do not need to reinvent the wheel. The wheel you have is very good and has gotten you very far. All you need to do is expand its focus while keeping its core. Because what you did was you took a wheel and made it into some sort of square monstrosity thing that's constantly falling over on one side. It gets quite good and then flump. It gets quite good and then flump. Right? The core of what made Doctor Who special, again, this is speaking from my point of view, is character. And while it had its ups and its downs, it wasn't always perfect. The character is what made us come back over and over again. You do not need to change that. If you write good characters, good story will follow. Because good characters can drive plot. This idea of wanting to reinvent Doctor Who and out with the old, and we need to change companions regularly, except I'm not actually going to do that. I'm going to keep Tegan for the entire run. Besides, but we need to change companions regularly. And, we want it to be more gritty and more real, and we don't want it to be funny. Doctor Who shouldn't be funny, and all this shite that he used to, that came into it. Dude, you had a good show. Yeah, Tom was getting tired, so you needed a bit more of a boost of energy, which you got in a younger Doctor. But leave the rest of it. Like, dude, Doctor Who's about people. Science fiction at its core is about people. Star Trek doesn't tell futuristic stories. Star Trek tells modern stories set in the future. Doctor Who doesn't tell futuristic stories. It tells modern stories set throughout different periods of time. And it tells people's stories set amongst different peoples. Do you know? We are the aliens are us. Do you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
It is the future is now. Do you know? And I think that's probably the biggest issue I've had since John Nathan Turner took over. And he's not the only showrunner that I'm going to have this issue with. Spoilers.
Yep.
Which in itself is a bit of a hint. The show has lasted as long as it has because it's a good show. You don't need to change it to make it your own. Also, that pilot you did with Liz Sladen, maybe don't make the dog the central focus, and maybe you'd go a bit further with it. Just saying. That was a very long comment. He'd just be sat there being like, bitch, get out of my office. How about you, though? What are your call out to JNT?
My call out to JNT is something that I will echo later on down the line, is that the show is not about you. It's very simple. The show is not about you. For anyone that's interested, I highly recommend a 2-volume series of books called Space Helmet for a Cow, given to me as presents by my wonderful co-host. And it's basically a history of the show and a history of the episodes. And I don't reference it as much as I should when we're doing this. But again, that's just, I think, the way that we kind of operate. But the John Nathan Turner era in the book is something that has been echoed by other who historians and documentaries that I've heard, is that John pretty much put a lot of his philosophies into it. And John was a very flamboyant person. And he made the show to kind of reflect that. And as the show goes on, it becomes there's a lot of pantomime. And he was a whore for pantomime. He was a whore for it, should we say. And it was like, but then they did all these promotional media tours and he was always front and center. It was like, it's John Nathan Turner and the cast of Doctor Who. And it's like with all due respect, at this stage of the game, no one gives a toss about the showrunner. Like, they really don't. And I suppose he kind of broke the mold in that regards to be like, guys down the line, the likes of Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat and Chris Chibnall. They all kind of are a bit more a focal point for the show than would have been once upon a time. Now, we didn't live in that time, so we don't know what it was like. Was very Lambert out front and center a lot, or fucking heaven forbid, fucking John Wiles was there. But that was the thing, was that like, or Philip Hinchcliffe or Barry Letts. Yes, Barry had a lot of him during his run.
Yeah.
But it stayed within the ethos of the show. Like, there was a lot of, and you kind of touched on it there, the writing reflected stuff that was happening at the time, which is what Barry had a lot of vested interest in. But it stayed true to the core of what the show was. And yes, Philip Hinchcliffe took it in a darker, a more gothic thing, and I love that. But again, it stayed within line as to what the show was, because you could easily see Bill Hartnell, the first Doctor, in a lot of those stories, and I would have loved it. So yeah, my thing would have been, it's not about you.
Yeah.
If you want to put your stamp on the show, do it, but keep the show's core there.
Yeah. There's an interesting. So there's a guy online. His name is Dominic Noble. I think I've showed you some of his stuff before.
Yeah.
Where he does these comparisons of book to film.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Lost in Adaptation. Very good.
Yeah,
highly recommend.
Very good. Mm-hmm.
But he has a phrase that I'm going to bastardize a small bit for this, right? But Dominic's phrase is, if you want to tell the author's story, tell the author's story. If you want to tell your own story, tell your own story. If you want to run Doctor Who, run Doctor Who. If you want to make your own show, make your own show. And that's fundamentally it.
Yeah.
Do you know? As for Peter, oh Peter, I met you before I'd seen all your stories, and we would have had a much different conversation if I went back in time and met you now. I may not have stood in that queue for that long. So, Peter, similar to Mark Strickland, I don't blame Peter for the way the Doctor is.
No.
Particularly with as strong a presence as J&T fighting the other corner. Peter, this character is like 700 years old. Try and tap into that a little fucking bit in how you view and deal with other people. This man was a grandfather. I mean, at some point he was presumably a father as well. This man was a grandfather. This man has been a friend. He has seen friends die. He has seen young companions grow and marry off and whatever. There's history. Try and bring that in a bit. Right? because that's something that I think we've often said that, like, oh, there's this, you know, trickle of the Doctor that sort of ties through all of them, and it's different bits of one and different bits of two and different bits of three and different bits of whatever. But I think with Peter being quite so young at the time that he was doing this, with all this other stuff happening, in his performance, sometimes I've said, this doesn't feel like the Doctor. It feels like he's just saying words.
Mm.
You know, because maybe the technobabble feels uncomfortable in Peter's mouth. Okay, it might feel uncomfortable in your mouth, but your character is 700 years old, babe. It's not uncomfortable in his. And you need to think that way when you're coming at this character. And maybe challenge your showrunner a bit more when you think he has your character treating his friends like shit. Just smidge. How about you? What would you say to Peter? Had you met him in 1982 specifically?
Kind of to echo your point a small bit is that push back. That simple as it is. It's like you know what this character is meant to be. You know who this what this character stands for. You know what he's like with his companions. Just, you know, push back, because we talked and we've echoed it quite a bit, and it's kind of like future spoilery, whatever. Is that Colin's Doctor, who will be talked about soon, is sort of an asshole by design.
Mm.
Peter's character just comes across like an asshole.
Yeah.
And it's like, if your character is meant to be an asshole by design, perfect. Lean into it. Don't sit on the fence and actually be one. And that is like, or that's what I'm saying with the Fifth Doctor.
Mm.
So I would say is that, like, push back, advocate for your vision of the, because that's what Tom did, that's what John did, that's what fucking Troughton did, and it's what fucking, you could be damn well sure Bill Hartnell did. And that's why I talked about John Wilde so lovingly. Yeah, but like, that's the thing. And like, we talked before, like, we've mentioned it in a trivia thing, like, where they weren't happy with certain decisions. And it's like, that, okay, that's vocalizing it, but fucking act upon that vocalization. Because I don't like talking fucking negative about stuff that I like, you know? Like, another prime example is I find it very, like, I love Star Trek The Next Generation, but I find it very difficult to watch fucking season 2 because of Dr. Pulaski. I don't like Dr. Pulaski, and she spoils a lot of that fucking series for me.
Same.
Not against Diana Muldaur, absolutely not. I think
oh no, she's a fantastic actress.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, I don't fucking like it because she spoils shit for me. So here, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of it, and we've made no fucking secret about it. Like, and but we don't like it. We like,
we don't like not liking it.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, and I think that kind of echoes a point that someone else answered to Paul's thing, which was Gloria Baritz, and she said that if she could go back, she would say to JNT, keep it original, but also listen to some feedback from the audience. As for Peter, I might advise him to be more time is spent on character creation. After all, the Fifth Doctor is not an easy person. Yeah, so thanks for that, Gloria. And Paul, we hope you appreciate it. And you're always good for some very interesting questions. So thank you very much, mate. Yeah.
You never make it fucking easy, do you? Fecker. Okay. Well, we finish off the listener question with Bruce, and then we'll go on to our own questions, maybe. So
yes.
Another question that came up on Twix from Bruce Gray. In your opinion, this is not Doctor Who specific. In your opinion, what is the ideal number of seasons for a TV series, and does this change depending on the genre of the show?
So I would definitely say that it can change depending on the genre of a show, because I think a 25-minute sitcom can run for however long. Like examples of this would be a more modern example is Modern Family. I love that show the whole way through all of its 11 seasons. Yeah, you know, you get the odd dip, but still a show that I can easily go back to, not a bother. Same with stuff like Frasier. Always love the original run of Frasier. Or a more personal one that myself and Trish both love, MASH. Like the probably definitely a bit more favored towards the BJ Honeycutt era myself, along with Charles Winchester, definitely. But still, I'll sit down and I'll watch the first 3 seasons and I'll enjoy Trapper and
Blake.
Blake, thank you. I was just going, fuck, don't blank on his name.
Blake and Burns.
Yeah, Blake and Burns, yeah. Well, like obviously Frank Burns is, Jesus, he's that man's fucking iconic. He's a sex maniac as well, according to the movie version. So yeah, but I would say for a drama series, or yeah, because like I would say like that Doctor Who would be, you could put it down to drama. It changes. Yeah. People say it's a kids show. Some people say it's drama.
Well, it's originally the drama department.
Yes, so. That's right. Also, it's a difficult question to ask because in recent years, the format for series has changed. Whereas before, like, we would have seen, like, 22 episodes a season. Now we're coming down to, like, the 13.8 mark. And when you got the advent of, say, like, Disney Plus with their Star Wars TV series, the runtimes for episodes, or even their Marvel series, it's like, 1 minute is like one story is 29 minutes and then another was like 48, and it's like it's kind of weird to tell. I think a solid benchmark is usually about 4 seasons, because I feel that that's enough time definitely for the main story to be told, or at least for the characters to be established and give everything breathing room, and also potentially wrap up like at least the big overarching thread. So I would say at least 4 seasons is a good number. Yeah, but I think it definitely depends on the genre, because like for like Law and Order SVU can keep running because it can remain very current with the way that the world works, and it's what it does. It references real life events in its episodes, so that can theoretically run on for however many seasons. But if you're doing original content, I would say at least 4 seasons.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question. I don't think there is an ideal number. I think it depends on the series that you're making. So again, I was specifically thinking of Law and Order SVU, which, I mean, has been running since 99,
I think.
98, pre 9/11 anyway. So
yeah.
It definitely started in the 90s. It's still running today. And I think for a procedural, so long as you keep your cast fresh, you're pretty good. So the likes of is it Law and Order SVU, even like things like Criminal Minds, 911, all those sort of shows, you can kind of let them run as long as you need. And maybe it becomes a little bit of like you have CSI Vegas, and then CSI Vegas is kind of tilting off. So you're going to go with CSI Miami, and then you can let that run for a little while and whatever. You might have like peaks and troughs a little bit, but you can essentially, because they're telling modern stories, there's always going to be stupid shit happening, and you just change up the characters. For science fiction shows, or genre television, shall we say, so the likes of Star Trek, Stargate, Supernatural. Supernatural went on, in my opinion, way too fucking long.
Oh, yes. Yes, it did. I still haven't finished it. I still need to watch the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, like, I started watching it, I binged a lot of it, and then I actually got sick of it. It went on very long. I'm of the opinion that for that type of show, so again, sort of 90s era Star Trek, even a modern Star Trek to some extent, I think it depends on the story you're trying to tell. If you're telling it in a sort of serialized format, kind of like TOS and TNG, you could probably do an SVU on it and let it run for as long as you possibly need to. and then spin it off into other things and do what he's doing. If it's going to have a story, though, such as Supernatural, such as Battlestar Galactica, such as Deep Space Nine in a way with the Dominion War, Voyager, right? They have to get on very fucking thing. I'm between 5 and 7. But you should know that going in.
Yeah.
You should know going in it's 5. You should know going in it's going to go to 7. Again, Buffy would be another example. Like, how long could Buffy continue being the Slayer? It fucking makes no sense. Right? So for genre television like that, so it's fantasy, sci-fi, that sort of general area, I would say between 5 and 7, personally. Then you have the other side of the coin, which is your shorter format. So like you said sitcoms. I think sitcoms can kind of, if you don't freshen it up a bit, it gets a bit stale. Like Modern Family, I stopped watching years ago, right? If you have a story that the characters can swap in and out of, then yeah, it can go on for a very long time. If you have a story with a set of characters, again, if you think the likes of like The Big Bang Theory, even Frasier or whatever, 7, 8 seasons, beyond that, you're kind of like, there's no development of these characters anymore. Because in a sitcom, compared to a procedural, in procedural, yeah, your characters develop, but they develop very slowly over time. Because each episode is about the guest story happening, the guest plot. Whereas when you have a story that's about the characters in it growing and developing, there's only so many times you can reset a character.
Yeah.
To have forgotten everything they learned from the week before. And even, I was listening to Mission Log the other day, and I can't remember what the episode was, something to do with, I think it was called Alice, something to do with Tom anyway, and how Tom Paris never actually learned anything. He went through all these arcs of learning to be a better man, and he was a dickhead the following week, all over again. So I think with them, again, I would probably be in the sort of 5 to 7 region, unless you were going to be changing your character. Now, soap operas, for example, 30 minutes run forever because you're constantly changing out your cast of characters, and they can fucking run ad nauseum because people are constantly changing it. Yeah. The likes of modern shows, so your Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, the Marvel or the Disney Plus shows in general, Stranger Things, things like that. Because how we create TV shows for those platforms is changing. Like they don't follow, like Law and Order SVU and like shows like Law and Order 911 still follow the standard. You know, it drops in September. They have, you know, a break around episode 11 or 12, and then they come back for the latter half of the season. They do that every year. With streaming shows, it's often you get one season and it's going to be 2 years before you get the next season. With that shit, you get 5 seasons tops. There's no beyond that because you either tell your story or like get off the pot. Do you know what I mean?
Like, or your actors age out, or because when you're setting something in like a finite amount of time, I think it's the one kind of thing you can say about MASH is like that it ran for fucking 11 seasons, and the Korean conflict ran for like 3 years. How many fucking Christmas episodes did they do? That type of shit. And then like with Stranger Things as well as that.
But the difference is that all those characters were adults, so you kind of don't notice it as much. Exactly.
Whereas with Stranger Things, like, sorry, like, but the fucking kids are visibly growing up, you know?
Yeah. The one exception to all the rules I've said, though, is The Simpsons. The Simpsons has run for as long as I've been alive, pretty much.
Like Simpsons, South Park, Family Guy, yeah.
The Simpsons in particular I go back to because it's run for literally my entire life.
Yeah.
The Simpsons characters never change. Ever. They don't get older. We rarely get new characters coming in for a prolonged period of time. South Park, I think, changes out their supporting characters a bit more often than
it adds new supporting characters in, and it actually expands upon them. But like one or two, they fall into the wayside, and obviously for some characters they get rid of for specific reasons.
Yeah. So with animated shows, you have a bit longer if you're creating shows where the premise is each episode lives in isolation. You don't watch The Simpsons for the overlapping story of, Maggie learning to talk.
Yeah.
You just don't. No one is waiting. Well, actually, a lot of people probably are, but no one's going to get the part 2 showdown of Maggie versus Mr. Burns. And if you get that reference, you're old as fuck.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, like, for me, I think a good ballpark is 5 to 7 seasons, unless you're going to be rotating out your cast on the regular, or you're something like a franchise show where one show can end, and you can start with a new cast with a new premise and let that run, aka Star Trek versus Doctor Who. But yeah, I'm interested in what your answer to that is, Bruce.
Absolutely.
Because I always find when people ask a question, they ask a question because they want to know if your answer is the same as theirs. So,
yeah. But then it's amazing, like, you can get a show like Knight Rider that guy just like seems to go on. It's case of it's like there's only so many situations you could throw a fucking talking car into, but it worked because it was 80s. It was wonderful. It was charming. Or no, sorry, I'll take it back. Not Knight Rider, Airwolf. How many fucking situations can be by a high-tech helicopter? But it had an amazing team tune. The 80s was so good for fucking team tunes.
yeah.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes, over to our questions now. Thank you very much for questions submission, everyone. We really appreciate it. We always love to hear from you. Now, I've been dying to hear it since you mentioned it. Give me your Tegan question.
Having now watched all of Tegan's run, and we're in Jump the Era is perfectly fine territory, what do you think of Tegan and her appearance in the modern show, specifically the Tegan-Doctor dynamic?
No, I haven't watched Power of the Doctor since it finished, or since it aired. Now, I really should have. But there was one thing that kind of stuck out at me. And I think I still view it in the same vein, but it speaks more to... Or I don't even know if it speaks more to something, because... So for people that haven't seen it, in Power of the Doctor, the current Doctor, Jodie Whittaker's version, appears to Tegan, but there's like this memory type filter on it. So she appears as the Doctor that Tegan traveled with, which is Peter's Doctor. And she has a go at him for like, oh, you just left. And I remember at the time thinking, fucking bitch, you were the one that tipped out the door, So it's like, I don't get where you're coming from with this. Now going back, I'm very worried about that side of things. Because Tegan and the Doctor's relationship, to me, is not a very good relationship. There is an awful lot of, again, from my perspective, fucking trauma there. He on more than one or two or whatever, however many occasions, he treats her like shit. He really does. He calls her stupid, and he gives out about her just doing absolutely anything. And he'll do the exact same thing, but it's a fault that all the Doctors have. But he never apologizes, which is what the other Doctors usually do. I won't say always, but they usually apologize. He doesn't. And for her to be... And the problem is that, like, traveling with the Doctor leaves a legacy upon that person. And they all go off and try to do wonderful things. They try to bring their travels with the Doctor's meaning into their current life. And it is a wonderful episode of the Sarah Jane Adventures, where at the end, Sarah Jane lists all the Earth-based companions of what they did since they stopped traveling. And like, you got Ben and Polly set up an orphanage, and Ace does, she sets up a charity foundation. Tegan starts working with Aborigines, for their rights. But all of them have this, it's all coming from this nice place, because departing with the Doctors is usually it's a lot less traumatic Then Tegan, who kind of left after witnessing slaughter and murder and civil war and a lot of strife. But it's like I often would like to read her recollections of her thing and just see, like, is there this weird, like, just like, does she recognize the toxicity? I know that's a very kind of buzzword now lately, but it just comes across as a very toxic relationship, and it's almost this Stockholm syndrome type thing, because she's so upset at the idea that he didn't come back for her, but you left because you couldn't take being there anymore. So my scoffing and anger at her has actually turned more into concern.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So again, you ask a question because you want to hear a mirrored answer. For me, the thing of it was, I had watched it without knowing anything really about their dynamic. Not to the extent that obviously I know it now. So the whole Braveheart Tegan and stuff like that came across like there was a lot of sentiment and emotion behind it. And there really wasn't. There really wasn't. And in many ways, it felt like they were trying to do School Reunion Part 2. You were my life, you left and never came back. For Sarah Jane, that was true. The Doctor left, said till we meet again, and they never met again. Now, I do still think the School Reunion overplayed that hand a small bit. But it seemed that they were trying to do the same thing with Tegan. I would have liked to have seen Tegan and Ace working together on something to do with charities before they get pulled into the whole story. Again, Sarah Jane set up this perfect fucking thing for them. But I think with the Doctor, I think, yeah, I don't get why she... I mean, on the flip side, he never came to visit. He was on Earth plenty of times. And I think that's a standing irritation all Earth-based companions have. Do you know what you mean? Yeah. Like, Joe Grant says it to Sarah Jane in Death of the Doctor. Like, what do you mean? You've seen him more than once? You've seen him recently? There's a common thread. But I think I want the dynamic they have in Power of the Doctor to represent the dynamic they had in the past. Because I kind of think Janet deserves it. Do you know? And the character of Tegan deserves it. But that wasn't the fucking relationship they had by a fucking country mile. So it does seem like it was... I mean, I would have much rather her go off at him being like, nothing has changed. Or go off at them, rather, because including Jodie, like, nothing has changed. I left you because people were dying everywhere we went, and this was happening, and this was happening, and it's been how many hundreds of years, and nothing has fucking changed. Actually, I would have wanted to see her angry from that point of view. Like, what have you learned since I left? Because I learned a lot after I learned a lot when I was traveling with you. I learned a lot when I left you. What have you learned? Fuck all. Okay, fair enough. You know? But yeah, no, because I knew that at the time you had mentioned to me, you're like, that, no. Now, if it had been after Time Flight, and if Tegan and the Doctor had never reconnected,
yes,
then it would have worked. But bitch, you went back and travelled with him again. So, and yeah, no, I do agree with you that she also is like a battered wife syndrome, more than a little bit. But yeah, so what's one of your questions that you have?
Okay, and I'll follow the trend, and I will ask you something that we kind of touched on earlier, and is that we've talked before about, you know, the highs and lows of podcasting, and we talk, like, for those of you that probably haven't cottoned on by now, myself and Trish are best friends, and we talk quite an awful lot. But this is the one time where it's a bit more structured. But like it's a thing like where we said, right, this is the absolute one time of the week where we have to meet up and stuff like that. And we both enjoy doing this. We love it. But my question to you is, and you kind of touched on it, does does the negativity around poor content affect your mood doing it? Does it affect your enjoyment of podcasting?
It does over time. So, full disclosure, between you and me, the four walls of the internet, and whoever is listening, there were times watching this, or, when I'd be like, I'd watch the episode the night before. And I mean the fucking night before. I didn't be 11:30 at night, my eyes before half falling asleep, and I still had 2 episodes to go. Because the idea of, I never thought I'd get to the point where I was forcing myself to watch Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And I was only watching it for the podcast. We've spoken in the past that when Stephen Moffat took over, I took issue with the show. I wasn't a big fan of his run, so I stopped watching it for a while. I came back to it later. With the format that we have, I don't have that luxury. Well, maybe we should tap Paul in, and Paul could have done it for me for a while. But yeah, so it did take a bit of fun out, which is why I said that, like, going from recording every week to recording once every 2 weeks, I didn't really mind that much. It does mean that we're still not fucking finished. We still haven't moved on to Colin. But yeah, I think the main thing is that, like, at one point I was like, God, I wish we could be discussing anything else. Like, we started this during COVID, and it was our, okay, we had to self-isolate. You were with your young family, I was by myself, and it was a way to say, okay, we're going to connect this way. And so it was really good from that point of view. But, like, we now see each other several times a week in work as well as this. Plus, obviously, we can hang out whenever we want to.
Yeah, yeah.
And so there were times when I was like, oh, fuck, we have to talk about fucking Doctor Who again. Fuck, we have to talk about Peter Davison's Doctor Who again. And I'm like, oh, couldn't we talk about Percy Jackson? Or the latest episode of Natalie Haynes' podcast or something. Let's do a deep dive on Medea or something. Anything else. Yeah. But I think you're going to get that way. I think it's like, it's the decision we made that, like, we want to get to the stories we love, and we have to get through the other ones to get there.
Yeah.
How about you?
So, yeah, like, a bit more history to this is we tried to first do this as a vlog series way back when, before the world went to shit. And one of the kind of driving factors for that was the rise in rage bait and hate grifting. And I hated this thing of where people were constantly dumping on what, like, stuff that at the time that I liked, and like I enjoy Jodie's run. I think she's a great Doctor. Is it 100% fantastic across the board? No, it's not. But I still enjoyed it. But you had this never-ending sea of just guys on YouTube fucking saying, I swear to God, if I hear fucking woke one more time, I'm going to punch someone in the dick or whatever is down there. And it was driving me fucking demented. And it was actually making me upset because, like, I don't want to feel bad for liking the things that I like. And it also kind of made me do a small bit of self-reflection, because I remember I was kind of like that when it came to the 11th Doctor, because I didn't like Matt Smith's initial run. And when I was trying to talk to when I didn't have you to talk to about Doctor Who, I was trying to talk to other people about Doctor Who, all I heard about this was the best thing ever. It's like, I would say, oh, like, how would you compare it to, say, like, the Third Doctor or whatever? Like, oh, I've never seen it. So how is it the best thing ever if you've never gone back and watched it type thing? So I will admit, like, I got a small bit gatekeepy. And looking back at it now, when like watching that reflection, I was like, you were some dickhead. Like, you absolutely were. And I then kind of just realized that, like, there's people out there that aren't going to like the things that I like. That's fine. We can have a conversation about what we each like about it and what we don't like about it. But just so long as it's a conversation, and as long as no one's trying to make the other person feel bad for whatever it is. And what I wanted to do was create this kind of space, like at least our thing, however many people it reaches, even if it reaches like 10 people that are going through the shit that we were going through or other people are going through. It's like, here is a thing that will just give you honest feelings without any sort of left, right, whatever agenda. This is what we thought of the episode. Please contact us. And we started doing that, and I was loving it because I was like, I don't care how many people are reaching. We're having fun. We're enjoying talking about the show that we're enjoying. And then we came to the Peter Davison era. And I would say that it's absolutely okay that we don't like this. But what I do not want, what I was hating was the perception of that we were dumping on the show. We were becoming those people. And that was what was tiring me. Like, I hated coming in and having this thing of like, I don't want to have to come in and talk about fucking negative thing about the show, because I don't want to give the impression that I don't like the show. I don't want to give the impression to people that they're wrong for not liking it the way that we're liking it or whatever, you know? So that's what was fucking tiring me out. And I think we've done a really good job of trying to get across the point going, please, if you like it, contact us, because we would love to know why you like it. Not to say that it's a weird oddity, but it's like genuine discourse without someone saying, you know, you're woke or you're racist or you're fascist or you're like a snowflake or whatever, like that kind of shit. Just, can we go back to conversations before social media gave every fucking idiot a platform to just spout bullshit?
I would like to point out that some people would argue that we are two idiots with a platform to spout bullshit.
Yes, but at least we, you know what I mean. Shut up. But yeah, so look, and we see it an awful lot in the sense of you have people will be making claims based on, oh, well, this person said this, so therefore it must be bad. And it's like, okay, but like they're coming at it from a really hardline point of view, and they're saying a lot of these kind of really buzz trigger words. Would you ever go to consider watching it yourself to rest your own opinion? It's like, but like, why? Because this person said, but I shouldn't have to, because this person said it was like the whole thing of you're doing God's work or you're doing the good work or whatever the case is. And it's like, that feels like kind of a cop out to me.
So let's move on to the next question. It actually kind of ties in a little bit with this, and we've talked about this a bit in the past, but it's always a question I'm interested to hear your answer to. If money and time were no object, and I say money and time because money artificially creates time in the sense that it gives you freedom to use your time differently. So if money and time were no object, what would you have us do a podcast on? I would say in conjunction with this one, not replacing this one, in conjunction with this one, because we've mentioned a couple of times, not in recent times, but we mentioned years ago, like other topics we do. So, what's currently forefront in your mind from that point of view?
Okay, so the stuff that we like have said that we would like to do would be MASH, Sharp to an extent, limited series, the Percy Jackson podcast, or like even like a mythologies based podcast. Like those are the ones that I think we would have the most fun with. And like I think, and I blame, says I, you're responsible for this, and it's become a bit of a nice industry. And I like,
this is weird. You're responsible for this. Like, I'm responsible for what?
You're responsible. No, like I've like whatever way the world has fucking shifted, it's actually kind of, it has reignited my interest in seeing stories from the female perspective, because there's books that I've read that are like, they have female characters as either like a secondary or tertiary protagonist, but still within that kind of like, point of view kind of side things, and stuff happens to them that becomes like, oh, this, it kind of shifts their personality, be it like war or sexual assault or whatever it is. And it's actually more so the sexual assault, and they kind of, and then all of a sudden, like, the character just becomes something different. And it's like, you're not exactly what you were before. And it's weird that it has to be kind of sexual assault, because that's what it is, like, in most of these cases. And I'm like, I would definitely love to go more and see these types of stories where the male guys are the secondary or tertiary protagonists, and the female being the center of things. Because you got me into Stoneblind, and like, Stoneblind is a retelling of Medusa, but from Medusa's point of view. And the classic portrayal in most media of Medusa is Clash of the Titans, where she's like this horrible fucking monster, you know, that gets cursed to turn men into stone. She's this thing. And it's like, okay, but the story has always been the same. She was cursed by Athena for profaning her temple with Poseidon. But the whole thing has always been, it's like, you know, he raped her. Right? I don't know why I keep starting with that word, but it's just like a weird thing, because obviously, you know, fucking for our listeners, it can be triggering for certain listeners, but he did. But then to actually get a story of it written from Medusa's perspective, it adds a whole new fucking twist to stuff. And we know that in Greek mythology is always kind of taught, well, at least to me, it was taught very weird, because you're always given like a Disneyfied version of it, where it's like the hero against the monsters, and, you know, rescuing the fair damsel. And then as you get older, you actually see the sources. Like, you see like Homer, or you see Ovid, or you see Sophocles, or whoever it may be. And you're kind of going, okay, the gods are fucked. And their champions are fucking douchebags. So getting it from the other person's perspective. Like in Stoneblind, I think is a fantastic story. Highly recommend it, along with Ariadne by Jennifer Saint,
Yep.
and then obviously, and then there was Circe by Madeline Miller. But I would love to kind of do more stuff surrounding that, because we had a great conversation with Tegan for Enlightenment, because the scoring that you had for Enlightenment, I think in your head has now completely changed upon retroactively, based on the conversation that we had about Tegan's portrayal in that story and the different perspectives we had on it. I love those conversations with you. Like, they're a lot of fun, because it's just good conversation to have. So I think that would be something that I would like to do.
Yeah. I am. Yeah, again, in case this wasn't obvious when we did a previous story that I've now since forgotten the name of, I'm quite into my Greco-Roman retellings from the female point of view. Natalie Haynes is a fantastic author. She has a brilliant podcast called Natalie Haynes Stands Up for the Classics. And she's also written some amazing books, Divine Might and Pandora's Box, or Pandora's Jar, being particularly very, Pandora, particularly very, very good. It's interesting to see these stories told through the male gaze constantly. And yeah, I do like discussing them, because again, I was re-listening, and I've listened to her podcast episodes, I don't know how many times, listening to them regularly on the way to work. And I was re-listening to Medea the other day. Well, not Medea, Medusa the other day. I said Medusa. And she made a point. It's so true. It's so true. Where we always look at Medusa from the outside. She's a monster. She has to be killed because she's turning people to stone. And we never look at it from her point of view. Of she can't look upon anyone, she can't connect with anyone, because anyone she looks at turns to stone. She's seen as a monster to be destroyed and a weapon to be used, because Medusa's head can still be used after she's dead. Right? And Perseus, the fucking pillock, uses it regularly. But then you have a male character who is similarly challenged with the golden touch, right?
Mm-hmm.
The story of Midas, right? Everything he touches turns to gold. And in certain retellings of that, in certain tellings of that story, it's seen as quite tragic. Because I can't remember who wrote one version. It was one version where he touches his daughter's hand and she turns to gold.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I'd seen it's been something. We never hear stories of heroes out to make their fortune who are going to hunt down Midas to cut his hands off. So they can take his power and turn everything to gold. I think that would be quite a cool power to have if you could control it by it not being your hands. But we never hear about that. So yeah, I love discussing that type of stuff. I love discussing it with you as well, because it's always good to have a sort of a good friend to discuss that type of thing with.
And just very briefly, I was asked recently by an older family member about the recent Conor McGregor thing here in Ireland, and I gave my opinion on it. And basically, like, my opinion is I don't like Conor McGregor, never have. But, like, and as I said, I go into these things, I try to be objective with these things. And again, as I said, there's an awful lot of pattern of behavior there. And I won't go into all the details of it, but I said, look, I believe that he is that type of person based on all the patterns of behavior that have been both stated and seen. And this older family member said, and is a female, I just, that's a very interesting perspective, like the young man's perspective. And I was like, I was kind of taken aback. I was kind of going like, you're of the same generation as my parents, and they raised me to have this viewpoint. So how is it an interesting, like, you're within that alley, so how is it interesting that I have this type of things? And I was like, and like, this is again wildly off topic, but I think it kind of comes back to the thing of why I'd like to do stuff in that vein of the podcast. Is my wife has said to me like that she reads horror stories like about new at the time new mothers and new fathers where the dads don't really do anything, and I was just kind of asking the question like, but why? It's a 50-50 thing, like, plus for me it's a very rewarding thing to be able to do that. So I honestly can't wrap my head around the fact of why someone that's actually present wouldn't do it. So yeah, like I think like having a daughter really kind of definitely kicked into overdrive by shifting to look at things from a different perspective.
But yeah, so actually my answer to this question has now changed, and I love this. So I was thinking about this because I kind of thought that we were going to talk about the fact that we haven't really enjoyed Peter Davison's run and whatever. And I was like, obviously you and I were talking about other shows, like we were talking about Lower Decks, we were talking about Agatha All Along, and I'm like, what the fuck, can't we do a podcast on that? Why can't we be talking about that? And I envy, in many ways, the format that Dan and Paul have, where they discuss whatever they watch. But now that you've said that, I sort of would love to do. So there's another podcast, again, I highly recommend. It's coming to an end soon. It's coming to an end in March, but I highly recommend it. It's been going for years, which is Women at Warp, which is another Star Trek podcast. And it's a bunch of women and non-binary peoples. And they don't talk about every single episode. They have a different topic each episode they talk about. Something like, I think the most recent one I listened to, which not the most recent one they put out, but the most recent one I listened to was about female Vulcans. This had an episode talking about female Vulcans. And so what you're describing kind of reminds me a bit of that. And I'm also remembering the episode of the B-Team podcast I did with my friend John Macy and Spencer, when after STLB 2 years ago, where we talked about the Star Trek episode Sub Rosa. And I gave my interpretation of that episode, which is very different to everyone else's interpretation of the episode. And part of me would kind of like to do a sort of, kind of like what we do now, but not limiting ourselves to one show. So just say like, oh my God, like, I recently picked up a copy of Medea, of Euripides' Medea. Dude, like, I read through it and it's fucking amazing. I think we should totally discuss it. Or like, I think, what do you actually think of the TNG episode, The Child? Like, not just from Deanna's point of view, but like talking about random episodes, like The Acolyte, right? Because I really liked The Acolyte. And obviously it got cancelled because various
Various
cynicisms.
reasons. Yeah.
Um, various cynicisms. Cancelling that show. But part of it kind of like that where we can sort of pick whatever topic we wanted. Do you know what I mean? And talk about whatever, and maybe a general topic about like the women of TNG versus the women of TOS, or the women of Stargate versus the women of Battlestar Galactica, or the men on Stargate versus the men on Battlestar Galactica. Not just women, but yeah. So it's interesting that because the answer I had originally was, I think it'd be fun to do the MCU.
Yeah.
Start at Iron Man, work our way up, and whatever.
Well, we had said that might be something like way back when we said that would
Yeah.
be something that we could do. But
mainly because I need to like gush about Agatha all along. It's an amazing show, and Patti LuPone was fantastic in it. But yeah, I now kind of just want to do a team chat where we just talk about whatever, but we can have those interesting, cis male versus cis woman perspective.
yeah, because
Thanks.
and this is like, as I said to I said this like a couple of episodes throughout the thing, is like myself and Trish, like we used to have like 5-6 hour conversations about this type of stuff, like about anything, about like Battlestar Galactica, Stargate, fucking the X-Men cartoons, just anything and everything that we were into, and we would take a look at it from various different perspectives. And it actually just kind of ties into another question that I have for you, is based on and I want to get the box sets. So the Doctor Who collector's box sets, they're releasing the seasons not chronologically but differently. And I think in the last Peter one, there's an interview with Janet Fielding about portrayal of women in the 80s. And I think her view of it was that her time on the show, now again, it's only a snippet, it could entirely be taken out of context, but I think what her viewpoint was is that there was better representation for women within the 80s, or within her run. I would, at the time, before I had finished her run, I would have highly disputed it. And after finishing a run, I still highly dispute it. So my question to you is, how do you think the portrayal of women has shifted from 1963 to current time of the podcast?
I don't think it's changed at all. I think it had the capacity to change. The 80s were ostensibly decade on decade gets better for the female experience, right? Mm-hmm. 50s housewives went into 60s and 70s summer of love type feel, women's liberation, into the 80s where you've got women in business being much more front and center. Weirdly enough, Thatcher being a big fucking part of that in a way. Into the 90s again, we've got more independence and all that kind of stuff. You're bearing in mind that at the time Doctor Who started, I'd need to fact check this, and someone can fact check me, but like in many Western countries, women couldn't open their own bank account.
I think in certain countries, yes.
Yeah, like the United States, women couldn't open their bank account. So I think the capacity to have the female companion change, and for that change to be more acceptable by the modern audience, was there. So yeah, when Janet came in, she came in the 80s. She herself was feeling much more free, much more liberated, I'm sure, compared to what she thought Liz Sladen would have had, or what she thought that Katie Manning would have had, and certainly Jacqueline Hill and all those. The difference is, and this is where I'm going to get on my quote-unquote woke soapbox, when you still have men running the show and writing the characters, that doesn't change anything. So it doesn't matter what the world will accept. If the writer's room or the showrunner or the script editor doesn't have that mindset, you're not going to get it. Barry Letts had that mindset. Philip Hinchcliffe had that mindset. So even though there were stories where their characters were a bit like damsel in distressy, they also pushed the boundaries with their characters. Terrance Dicks was not of that mindset. So it didn't matter that you had the 70s with like Liz Shaw and her go-go boots and being a super scientist. If you had Terrance Dicks writing the character, the woman's job is to ask questions and stand prettily in the corner. So, to Janet's point, I think the 80s could have allowed for her character to be much more independent, much more of a go-getter, much more like, again, like a Donna Noble and a modern companion that we see today. But you're the same people with the same mentality writing them, for the most part. So it didn't change. It didn't change at all. There's absolutely no difference between Tegan and the companions that came before her in terms of what she was able to do as a character. Which is why I got on my fucking high horse 12 years ago when Janet first made that comment in my presence. Now I understand the comment a bit more. But I don't think anything has changed. Even in some ways, up until now. Characters like Donna are the exception.
Mm-hmm. Not the rule.
Not the rule. Because, and like, if you even like step away from Doctor Who, I had this thought the other day. I can't remember what it was. It was like, why do people hate Ray so much?
Because, sorry, is that a rhetorical question? Or
No, it's a genuine question. Why do people hate Ray so much?
So, I've had these conversations before with like some absolute diehard Star Wars fans that are reasonable to talk to. And the overarching thing is that it is almost impossible to please Star Wars fans. Because what happened was episode 4, 5, and 6 they're fucking lightning in a bottle. They absolutely are. You cannot recapture it. Episodes 1, 2, and 3, and like the hype was fucking huge. I remember, like, I have visceral memories, almost like I can taste shit, that type of thing, you know, with the memories of 1, 2, and 3. And 1 came out, and as a kid, I was like, "Oh, this is so cool, flashy lightsaber." And then I hear all the voices of my older brothers and cousins are like all these complaints, and then as it went on, like, you know, you have episode of Attack of the Clones and all the issues that had with that, and then you have Revenge of the Sith, and it was like, okay, cool, now we've capped off that story. But then we came back to the future. We came to episodes 7, 8, and 9. And it's like, okay, cool, we still have Mark Hamill, we still have Harrison Ford, we still have Carrie Fisher. This can be their whole thing. And in that time as well, you had Heir to the Empire, you had the Tron trilogy, you had the expanded, which is now called the Legends books and all that kind of stuff. You had all this stuff. And that's what fans were hoping for. And then J.J. Abrams came in, and he essentially redid A New Hope, and he killed off a beloved character. And he gave the spotlight to a female character that a lot of people felt that it wasn't the person that they wanted it to be. And also, you're kind of in this time in the fucking public consciousness of why is everything being fucking, you know, womanized or DEI or all this kind of shit. And you had the whole thing of everyone brings up the fact it was like, oh, why is she able to fucking beat Kylo in the lightsaber fight? And everyone conveniently ignores the fact that he was fucking shot by Chewie's bowcaster, and he is struggling to keep upright with that fucking move. Like throughout the entire movie,
and he just killed his dad.
And he just killed his dad. But we also get throughout the entire movie, we're showing the power of Chewie's bowcaster. It's fucking knocking guys 10 foot back. Guys in armor, mind you, 10 foot back. And he drops to a knee when he gets it. And he has to go there and fight someone. And he fights Finn. That's fine. And we've shown there that First Order troopers are trained with combat weapons. So Finn is able to at least try and better. But then you have Rey. And it's like, why is she able to do all this kind of stuff? Like, we've seen like how why Anakin was so good at using the Force and it fucking surged through him. Why can't it be the same to someone? Adrenaline surges. That's how I kind of parse it
Also,
out.
she was a scavenger and had to defend herself, so therefore she
Yeah,
learned how to fight.
yeah. But so like that's and there was this whole thing of like it's not the way that we wanted it, and then there was the whole thing of like okay, well they like, A New Hope was too like oh sorry, Force Awakens was too like A New Hope. We want something different, and then they did something different with The Last Jedi. And I love The Last Jedi. I will defend it absolutely. Does it have flaws? Yes, but is it a good movie? A good Star Wars movie? I think so. And then the outcry was that it's not enough like Empire, or it does all like there's the whole, like we're going to spend an awful lot of time talking about this, but there's discourse surrounding what Luke did and blah 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 blah, and it's like no, it's you can't have it both ways, and it was just really fucking annoying at the time, and it's still annoying to this day.
Okay. I have a slightly differing perspective. Everything you say is true,
Okay.
right? Fundamentally. I have a slightly differing perspective. And I've thought about this recently. The original Star Wars trilogy, you had two main character arcs. Wait, no. You had supposedly three main characters. Luke, Han, and Leia.
Mm-hmm.
But you had two character arcs. Luke and Han. Leia doesn't get a character arc.
Mm-hmm.
Leia enters into the story in A New Hope as a fully formed woman who knows exactly who she is. Her personality doesn't change. She doesn't grow as a person. She falls in love. It's really the only thing. But she doesn't have to accept her failures. She doesn't have to step in and answer the call to adventure. She's already doing that. She's been doing that since she was a child, right? So that goes through the entire original trilogy. Right? I would argue that Leia gets a backseat in Return of the Jedi that is never fucking explained. But however, the female character is fully formed. And she's accepted for who she is. Right? Yeah, they tried to sexy her up in the third one. Whatever. Go to the prequel trilogy. It's Anakin's story. It's about the fall of Anakin. Padme, who's the only other main female character. So if you imagine the trio of Anakin, Padme, and Obi-Wan, right? Padme is fully formed. Padme is 16 in that first film. But she is fully formed. She is a ruler. She is strong. She's independent. And whatever. Again, she devolves a little bit towards the end. But she's independent. She doesn't go through any character growth or any character arc because she doesn't need to. She's a fully formed character. We don't need to see her struggle. Then we get to the sequel trilogy. And we have Poe, Finn, and Rey. And they said, okay, Finn has his discovery. Poe is our fully fledged character. Because you and I talked about this before, because Poe is Leia in the sequel trilogy. Or at least in the first film. Poe is Leia, because he's the one that's already in it. And Rey is the other one going on a character journey. But we're not used to women in Star Wars going on character journeys, because women in Star Wars are fully fledged. And they don't need to develop. So you could have The Mandalorian, where the male characters are going on a journey and whatever. But you have Ahsoka. Why are these women changing? Like, why are they experiencing growth and development? Women in Star Wars don't change. Women in Star Wars enter the universe fully formed. And they never change. It's an interesting note I had, because we have The Acolyte. Fucking fantastic show. Was it perfect? No. Not by a million years. Is it arguably more interesting from a universe building perspective than the Book of Boba Fett? Yes. A million times yes. But it's got women in the centre. And it's women going on a journey and women going developing. And that's not acceptable in Star Wars. Because it never was. And that's where a show like Star Trek is actually different. Because even in the original series, where they didn't have that many episodes centered around Chapel and Uhura, they did still have episodes about them. But Star Wars never did. Because it was always about the hero's journey and the scoundrel redeemed. And then it was the fall of the hero. And the
Mhm.
female characters are just there, fully formed, expected to fill in the blanks and to comfort them when they do something incredibly stupid or when something sad happens. And so it's like, if you don't make your audience aware of the female view of things, like, again, it's the running joke, and you and I have discussed this before. There's a bit in episode 4
Mhm.
that will get on my tits to the end of time. And Robot Chicken made a joke about it, and it
Mhm.
is 100% fucking true. They escaped the Death Star. Obi-Wan died. Sad. Everyone's sad.
Mhm.
Obi-Wan died. Luke is sat there, feeling sorry for himself at the weird, funky chess table. And Leia comes over with a blanket and cares for him after the
Mhm.
man he met about 72 hours beforehand died. This is in the same film where the same woman watched her crew be shot and killed, was tortured, and watched her entire planet with everyone she knows and loves be blown to smithereens. But no, we'll comfort Luke, because the old man he met yesterday died.
Mhm.
The old man who actually was a friend of her dad, and you could argue she knew him better.
Mhm.
But no, it's fine. We'll comfort Luke, because women are there to be caregivers and to be fully formed and to not require any growth and development. This has been a very long tangent.
It has.
But
But
this is the type of
it's our stocking trend.
this is the type of conversation, though, that I like having with you.
Mhm.
And so if we were ever to spin up another podcast, I would just want to have team chats, and we would just pick a topic and say,
Yeah.
what do you think about the fact, why do we hate Pulaski so fucking much?
Yeah.
Is it because she's a dick to Data?
Mhm.
Short answer. That is a large
Yeah.
portion of why we hate
Yes.
Pulaski. It's not the only reason. A significant portion of it, though. Cool. Let's go on a little bit, right? Because I have one more Doctor Who related question for you. I don't have any more questions or rambling
Yeah.
thoughts for me.
I don't have any other questions. That was pretty much it.
So, Ncuti Gatwa recently had
Mhm.
his first season.
Mhm.
Overall, I think we both agreed it was quite good.
Yeah.
Some episodes were stronger than others, but overall quite good. We saw the return of a villain that you hold in quite high regard. Differing people had different opinions on the return of this villain.
Mhm.
So, Paddy, what did you think of the return of Sutek?
So, the reveal, it fucking raised every single conceivable hair on my body. It was so fucking well done, and to hear his voice was amazing. It chills, absolute chills. My God, did they shit the bed on the fucking end of it? Oh, like, I know that we're going to get down there, get to that point in a couple of years, but Jesus Christ, and like, to be like Russell usually does the follow up part to his big season cliffhanger very well. Here it was comical. All the impacts hit. In the first 5 minutes of part 2 are completely. It's a yeah, no, they shit the bed. I just it was just ridiculous. Like, there's some absolute magical MacGuffins out there that, like, I would kind of go, all right, what, fair enough, but this was too much. Yes, thoughts?
Yeah, I liked the reveal. I thought the reveal was great. The idea, it was the memes.
Yeah.
of Sutek just hanging out on top of the TARDIS. In every other story since the Pyramids of Mars, it's just Sutek sort of hanging out, being like, "Oh look, we're in a weird void. Where the fuck am I? What is this?" Or like Sutek being like, "Oh look, look at all the Daleks flying through a wall. That's so fucking fun." Like every time, or like in Jodie's run, when she has to go find the TARDIS, and he's just hanging on a planet going, "Where the fuck am I? What is this? Where's the Doctor? Why am I here?" Or like when the TARDIS was exploding in the sun with River in the Big Bang too. It's just Sutek exploding over and over and over. It's just so like they could have done it without that. They went to the edge of the universe. They whispered the words. Anything was possible. Sutek. There's so many conceivable reasons they could have done that allowed Sutek to be there at that point in time. But him just hanging out for, bear in mind, in the Doctor's personal timeline, billions of years. Just hanging at the top. Oh, it's just hilarious. The other part of it that I just couldn't help but laugh was the resolution. Where they literally caught him by the leash. And dragged him back through time.
Like
it made zero impress. Like,
I say this with all the love in my heart for because I have a lot of family that are there. But like this was like did a fucking Corkman write this resolution? the double negative is a positive, the double positive is a negative.
Yeah, no, like when it was revealed, I was like, holy shit. No, I also did want Susan to come back in some capacity, and please, for the love of God, bring that character back. But yeah, once the memes started, I was like, oh, Russell, oh, you dear man, you tried so hard, but you just royally like he had it. They went to the edge of the universe, and anything was possible. And at that point, because if you remember in Pyramids of Mars, like, oh, I've sent him so far into the future, whatever. It's like, cool, have him be there at the edge of the universe. And at that point, he latches on. So he's been there for all of the Doctor's recent adventures, hence why you had the face appearing everywhere. But like, yeah, no.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, yeah. Those were my questions for you, my friend.
And those were my questions for you, my friend. So I think we, as always, was an awful lot of fun. And I hope that Rambly also gave like our older listeners a bit more insight into what you and I are like.
And what gets cut in the edit.
Yeah, what gets cut in the edit, absolutely. We say punch with impunity. And then for newer listeners, if this is your first time coming in, God help you. But it's an absolute taste of what we're like. But as always, thanks to everyone for the questions. Thanks to Paul and Dan for their long-term friendship and their loyal support. Thanks to other loyal listeners out there like Shane. Bruce, thank you very much for your question. It's always great to hear from you. And to the various people that have followed us throughout the years, as always, thank you so much. Thanks for putting up with our, as Billy Connolly would say, inane drivel. And as always, thank you to you, Trish.
Thank you too, Bib.
Okay.
It's been a long road getting to this point.
Oh, you just had to fucking say that, didn't you? Oh.
Do you know, just to go back for a second, that's something that I want to see more of in the
What?
modern day. We had it twice with Shooty. We need more musical episodes of Doctor Who.
Yeah. I want to. Well, we won't ever get to see it again, but I want more recognition for Ian's dad dancing. So everyone, until next year, bye bye.
Bye bye.